Assassin's Creed is one of the most recognizable video game franchises of all time. It's a series that took over from Prince of Persia as Ubisoft's flagship string of games. But of course, as with any series that has gone on for as long as Assassin's Creed has, there's bound to be some duds along the way. Ubisoft's refusal to allow any protagonist besides Ezio to have a sequel hasn't really helped things. So today, I'm going to be looking back on Assassin's Creed once again, and I'm going to try and fix the series once again. Now, I've already made a video about fixing Assassin's Creed, but I'm not gonna lie, I don't really think it was the best video I've ever made. The ending felt a little too similar to Terminator 3, and it kind of feels like a cop-out looking back more than anything else. So think of this as an alternative to the last fixing video. With that in mind, let's delve into fixing Assassin's Creed version 2. So in this version, we're starting off with Assassin's Creed Revelations, which is the first game in the series that I thought had problems. 1, 2, and Brotherhood were all about as good as they were going to get at the time. Revelations, meanwhile, is different. In this game, we're cutting out tower defense mode entirely since it actively hindered the experience of the original game. Also, this game won't feature any actual villains. Ezio's own worst enemy in this game will be his age, which begins to hold him back. Besides that, I would keep everything about this game exactly the same. It wasn't the best game ever, but the story made up for it. By eliminating the worst aspect of the original game, and giving Ezio an even more relatable story of getting too old to do his job anymore, and you've got yourself a much better Assassin's Creed game in my opinion. Now, contrary to popular opinion, I really like Assassin's Creed 3. Like, really like it. I made an entire video talking about why Connor Kenway was an underrated protagonist, and I'm staying to that belief. With that in mind, I'm keeping AC3 exactly the same in this timeline. The only difference is that Desmond doesn't die at the end of it. I don't care how they keep him alive or what they do with him afterwards, but he doesn't die. I'm actually not going to fanwrite the modern day stuff at all because frankly, the past story is just more interesting to me anyway. But whatever you do, don't kill off Desmond. So now we're moving on to AC4 Black Flag, another game that I loved and would keep pretty much exactly the same. The only difference is that at the end of the game, we don't see Edward as an older gentleman living in high society with his kids. Instead, we learn that Mary Reed's child was in fact Edward's son. Yes, Edward and Mary actually get together in this game, and she dies giving birth to his son, Haytham. Yes, in this version, Haytham Kenway is Mary Reed's son, which actually explains a lot. It explains his sarcastic attitude, and it would fit nicely with his age at the beginning of AC3. Plus, we have the added bonus of the couple everyone wanted to get together actually getting together. Otherwise, the ending of the game is exactly the same. Edward still learns of Jennifer's existence, and he leaves his life as a pirate behind and becomes an assassin. He then leaves for England with his 2 children. And so this leads us into the immediate sequel, which instead of Rogue is called either Assassin's Creed 5 Union Jack or Assassin's Creed 5 Pedigree. Now, let me explain these name choices. I decided on Union Jack to try and keep the flag motif from the previous game, Black Flag, but I also thought of Pedigree because in this game, Edward is in London and he's trying to become a father, and he's trying to establish him and his family into higher society. So I chose a regal English-sounding name with Pedigree. I thought that would make a lot of sense. Now, obviously, this is a sequel to Black Flag, like I said, and as I also previously mentioned, it will take place in England, as Edward tries to establish the British assassins and learns to be a father for his children. He also has to try and leave his pirate life behind, and he struggles with his newfound responsibilities. The game takes place over the course of about 6 or 7 years, and it ends on a bit of a bitter note. Edward is killed by a friend of the family named Reginald Birch. Birch had been an ally of Edward throughout the game, but at the end of it, he reveals his true colors and betrays Edward, killing him. So yes, this ends on a bittersweet note, but it does get people hyped up for the next game in the series, where we'll be able to avenge his death. And so this brings us to Assassin's Creed Lone Eagle. This will be a Haytham Kenway standalone game. Everyone wanted Haytham to get his own game, and he's getting one in this timeline. Just like in the comics, Haytham is manipulated by Reginald Birch and indoctrinated into the Templar Order. We finally get to see the opposite side of the war. This game features Haytham's training, his relationships to fellow Templars, and his first few missions. We then skip ahead into his proper adult years, where he's now with Zio in colonial America, and he learns the location of his sister Jennifer, who's been missing since his father died. He then travels to the Middle East, recovers his sister, and learns of Birch's involvement in Edward's death. So the game ends with Haytham exacting revenge for his father's death. So now Lone Eagle is followed up with Assassin's Creed Rogue, which remains exactly the same as in real life, because I believe it's extremely underrated, and it's my personal favorite. Except that in this timeline, it's a proper 12 to 13 sequences long. This will also be Haytham's last ride, the last game that Haytham will appear in. Shay Cormac still ends the game by killing Charles Dorian, setting up AC Unity, which will also be exactly the same in this timeline. Because I've also gone on record to say I really like Assassin's Creed Unity. I think that it gets way too much flack, and I actually think it's a very solid Assassin's Creed game. The only difference I would make is that this game, when it releases, actually works. Alright, there's no glitches, there's no problems like that, no excuses. It's just a solid, well-made Assassin's Creed game. At the end of the game, Arno is still kicked out of the Assassin Brotherhood, and he's not entirely over Elise's death, which sets us up for the last game in this epic saga, Assassin's Creed Disunited. Now, I chose the name Disunited because in Assassin's Creed Unity, Arno is trying to bridge the gap between the Assassins and Templars through his relationship with Elise. However, with Elise now dead, in the sequel, he's going to be fighting a Templar. He's going to be going after his father's killer, Shay Cormac. Therefore, the Assassins and Templars are no longer trying to unite with each other. They're officially disunited in this game. This will be the most ambitious title in the series so far. In this game, as I mentioned, Arno is trying to cope with the death of Elise by hunting down his father's killer. He learns that it's Shay and he goes after him. Meanwhile, Connor in the United States learns of Shay's involvement in the Colonial Brotherhood's demise and promptly travels to Europe to hunt him down. So this game works a lot like Grand Theft Auto 5. You can switch between playing as Shay, Connor, or Arno and go on a bunch of different missions as any of them. There's a bunch of different missions exclusive for each character. However, the game will end the same way no matter what you do. Shay gets overwhelmed by Arno and Connor and is killed. Shay tries to justify his actions in Rogue by explaining the truth. The Colonial Assassins were horrible, and they went against every assassin tenet. The Colonials killed innocents, they failed to hide in plain sight, and they compromised the Brotherhood. So Shay dies a proud Templar. Arno and Connor are shocked to learn about how bad the Colonial Assassins were, and they swear to never let the Brotherhood become so bad while they're alive. I believe that it's important to justify Shay's actions because a lot of people don't like Rogue because they don't like Shay. They think that Shay is some villain, that he's a traitor, that he deserved every bad thing that came his way. I feel like it's important to justify Shay's actions and make sure people know that Shay's not the bad guy. And in turn, that will cause more people to want to go back and play Rogue, not just because he's in this game, but because they let you know in this game that he was not the bad guy in Rogue. So after this, Arno and Connor go their separate ways, with Arno now over his grief and being accepted right back into the Parisian Brotherhood, while Connor returns to the United States and subtly hangs up a picture of his father, realizing that the Templars aren't always so bad after all. So now we're done with the Kenway Cormac Dorian saga, and we're moving on to the Bayek trilogy. Bayek really should have gotten a sequel, so this version he will. After having spent 7 games around the same time period, people are just starting to get eager for something new and something different. So we go to the very beginning. We go back to the Assassin's roots with AC Origins, which remains exactly the same in this timeline. No changes necessary at all. Origins, however, does get a sequel, which takes place in ancient Rome and features both Bayek and Aya as interchangeable main characters in a similar format to Assassin's Creed Syndicate in real life. This is in response to claims that Assassin's Creed is too much of a sausage fest, considering that every game in the series so far has had a male protagonist. So this game will explore the formation of the First Brotherhood in Rome, however, it does end on a sour note with the death of Bayek. I don't know who kills Bayek because I decided not to try and pick a villain. That is up to you guys. You can come up with your own creations. I don't really care. All that matters is at the end of the second game, Bayek dies. Aya then swears revenge on whoever killed him, which sets us up for the third and final game in that saga, which is an Aya standalone game, where she finalizes the first Assassin Brotherhood in Rome and hunts down Bayek's killer. After this, Ubisoft finally decides to create a fully modern-day Assassin's Creed game starring Desmond Miles as the main character. And I know what you're thinking, this might be impossible, but if Spider-Man PS4 can make modern-day New York an explorable sandbox, then so can Assassin's Creed. And that's as far as I'd like to go with this, honestly. So with this, everybody gets a sequel to flesh out their characters further. The first female-led game is an awesome story that makes Aya look like a truly sympathetic but empowering badass. Haytham gets the standalone game that he deserved. The Templars get more time to be seen as equals to the Assassins, thanks to the efforts of Lone Eagle, Rogue, and Disunited. And everything concludes with a badass modern-day game led by the modern-day character that everybody loved. And that is how I would have fixed Assassin's Creed again.